A thick fog hung over the industrial district, clinging to the sides of tall metal warehouses and creeping into the winding alleyways. Rusted pipes and iron structures grew like skeletons under dim sodium lights. Siobhan Eldcroft adjusted her worn coat and stepped off the curb onto a damp patch of concrete. She took in a breath that tasted like smoke, gloom, and old machinery. It was a place most people avoided at this time of night, but for someone like her, someone with a curse as much as a gift, these hours brought the clearest opportunities. She was cursed, though her father once told her it was a blessing. Eyes that perceive the lingering dead. Not just fleeting shadows, but full-bodied apparitions that wandered paths beyond mortal senses. For years, that ability had tormented her, and it took a sharp turn the day she left the police force under circumstances she refused to describe to anyone. At the age of 30, she had seen more ghosts than she had living friends. But it was those eyes and the small investigative agency she had cobbled together that the museum's director had come to rely on when a priceless relic vanished a week ago. Leaning against a lamppost, she scanned the area. Her contact was a restless spirit named Briggs. He had been dead for a few months, an unfortunate soul crushed under a locomotive engine when a rig malfunctioned. People rarely saw souls bound to the metal and dust of the living world, but for Siobhan, he was as clear as any living person might be. She closed her eyes and cleared her thoughts. The city's quiet, broken only by the faint hissing of steam vents and the distant clang of iron rods, vibrated in her ears. A figure flickered near a row of stacked crates. Briggs's shape wavered like a reflection on water. He wore the same coveralls he must have been wearing when the accident happened, the faint insignia of a manufacturing company on one shoulder. Thin, translucent lines etched across his skin like fractures in ice, evidence of his violent death. Through the haze, he lifted his head toward Siobhan and drifted closer. "I don't have long," he whispered, voice echoing like a half-forgotten memory. "The ones who took that relic, they're messing with things they don't understand." Siobhan nodded, letting the ghost's raspy tone push aside the city's background hum. "I need names or something that can lead me to them. There's good money in recovering that artifact, but more importantly, if they open it, it'll be a world of problems." She had read the museum's reference material, an obsidian idol said to contain a malignant spirit that could wreak havoc if awakened. Briggs wavered before clutching his middle, as if stricken by a flash of phantom pain. "I've heard about a group, Dark Cloak's half-baked occult membership. If you want them, look in the old foundry. The supervisor there, I used to see him going in after hours. Gave me the creeps." Before she could ask another question, the ghost dissipated, a swirl melting back into the nether-like gloom. Siobhan shuddered, tucking her coat around herself for warmth. Wishing she had asked more, she flicked the corner of her collar and hurried toward the battered industrial fence that separated the foundry from the cracked avenue. No matter how many times she had encountered ghosts, each interaction still chipped away a little piece of her composure. Still, it couldn't show. She needed to remain calm, neutral, and prepared for anything. The wind scraped across her cheeks like sandpaper as she approached the chain-link gate. A single overhead light buzzed, revealing a guard booth. Empty. 2 wire fences with barbed wire on the top enclosed the lot. She moved carefully along the perimeter until she found a gap wide enough to slip through. Inside the foundry was a broken labyrinth of dilapidated structures. Tall chimneys rose against the sky like black towers in a Gothic painting. Broken windows lined the walls, shards of glass missing or patchy. The entire place smelled of rust, sulfur, and old motor oil. Her footsteps echoed on the concrete. As she ventured deeper through a corridor of steel beams and scattered scrap, she spotted an entrance marked with peeling letters. The door was ajar, and the faint flicker of candlelight, of all things, drew her attention. She pressed her ear against the dented metal door. Voices, several of them low and chanting. Siobhan's heart rate kicked up as she pictured robed figures around a stolen artifact. She had known groups to dabble in the occult, but most lacked genuine power unless they wielded something truly dangerous. And that obsidian idol was exactly the sort of item that could grant them an unearthly advantage. She quietly slipped inside, finding herself on a narrow staircase leading down to what appeared to be the foundry's sub-level. The rhythmic chanting grew louder with each step. Rusty pipes snaked overhead. The air turned stagnant, filled with a sickly, sweet smell of incense that churned her stomach. At the far end of the corridor, candlelight spilled from a wide archway. There she halted, pressing her back against the wall. From her vantage point, she saw them. Half a dozen figures wearing dark robes. 3 men, 3 women. They circled a square slab of stone surrounded by flickering candles in brass holders, and resting on that stone was the relic. The stolen idol fashion, in a twisted humanoid shape, sharp edges catching the dim glow. Its eyes, carved into the obsidian, seemed alive. A tall man at the center towered over the others, chanting with an evident sense of authority. He lifted a narrow dagger with a crooked blade. The artifact loomed before them, capturing the candle-lit shadows in its cut facets. Siobhan felt a twist in her gut. She had always known how potent such an object could be, but seeing it put to ritual use underscored the crucial need to retrieve it before the group unleashed something unstoppable. Judging by the circle they formed, it wouldn't be long before they attempted to invoke the spirit bound within. If they succeeded in opening that vessel, she doubted the city's first responders, or any one, would be prepared for the consequences. Yet charging in without any plan would be foolish. She retreated a few steps, scanning the corridor for something to give her an edge. She found a rusted iron bar leaning against a battered machine shell. Grabbing it, she tested its weight. Not ideal, but it might do. She glanced around, looking for any ghostly presence that might still roam this sub-level, hoping an ethereal ally could cause a distraction. However, the only presence she sensed was a faint swirl of gloom at the edge of her vision, possibly just a residue of old tragedies embedded in these walls. Clenching the iron bar, she inched back toward the archway. The chanting rose in intensity. Through the corner of her eye, she spotted the lead figure raising the dagger again, this time over a shallow stone bowl. A metallic resonance hovered in the air, tinged with an energy that made her bones vibrate. The man's voice rose, half lost in echoes. Siobhan took a single deep breath. She counted to 3, then burst into the chamber, brandishing the iron bar at the nearest figure. Startled cries rang out as they whirled to face her, the circle breaking. The robed men and women stumbled back, but the leader hissed in fury. The dagger glinted as he recoiled, pivoting to face the intruder. "Hold it right there," she growled, voice echoing in the chamber. "You're messing with dark energy. That artifact isn't yours." A bearded acolyte lunged forward, swinging a copper censer in an attempt to knock Siobhan off balance. She sidestepped and brought the iron bar crashing into his shoulder, toppling him with a dull thud. Sparks from the bar's contact with the stone floor lit the dusty darkness. Another cultist rushed in with a sharpened rod, but Siobhan ducked, hooking his ankle in a swift motion and sending him sprawling. From the corner, a woman with sunken features launched a chanting incantation, red, black sparks crackling from her fingertips. Siobhan felt static prickle across her skin. She flung herself behind a metal column, the energy blast shimmering across the floor. Candles wobbled. Drips of wax pattered as half a dozen candle flames guttered, casting twisted shadows. She could sense the supernatural tide in the room rising. The artifact pulsed with unholy resonance, bright as a coal glowing in a dying fire. Feeling a wrenching pull in her chest, she realized the spirit within the idol sought to break free, perhaps fueled by the conflict swirling around it. She gritted her teeth and risked a glance at the leader. He was muttering something under his breath, voice resonating with unnatural power. Siobhan bolted from cover, hoping to disrupt the man's concentration. She collided with him, knocking his arms apart. The dagger clattered against the stone table, echoing sharply. The group's chanting turned chaotic. 2 of the robed figures scurried to retrieve the dagger. The tall man shoved Siobhan back with unexpected strength. She stumbled against the slab, nearly knocking the idol onto the floor. "Fool!" he roared, his eyes wild beneath a drawn hood. "You cannot hope to stop us. The relic calls to the beyond." She noticed the artifact trembling. There was a faint whisper in the air, an otherworldly voice that brushed against her hearing like a cold wind. A creeping sense of dread wrapped around her. The stolen relic was awakening, and even from her vantage, she felt an ancient malice pressing into her consciousness. Summoning her nerve, Siobhan steadied the iron bar and swung it in a wide arc, forcing the leader to back away. She kicked a candle at his feet, the hot wax spattering. He howled in pain as it scorched his skin, giving her a momentary opening. She grasped the idol, ignoring the shock of cold that stung her palms. Before she could secure the relic, one of the female cultists slammed into her from the side, forcing her to drop the artifact onto the stone slab. The woman clawed at her coat, shrieking an incantation. Siobhan struggled, wrestling her away, and struck her temple with the iron bar. The woman's eyes rolled back, and she collapsed. Lost in the commotion, the male acolyte with the censer blindsided Siobhan, hooking an arm under her chin. Gasping for air, she jabbed her elbow into his ribs. He released her with a grunt, staggering back. But the momentary scuffle allowed the leader to snatch up the dagger once again. "Bear witness," he bellowed. "Whether you want it or not, we shall open the path for the spirit within." He plunged the dagger into the stone bowl. A reverberation rippled out like a shock wave, accompanied by a low moan that rattled the chamber's walls. Candles flickered and snuffed out, plunging the space into near blackness. The idol glowed, faint but unearthly. Something stirred at its core. Siobhan's head spun. She felt her curse reacting, drawn toward that spectral surge. The boundary that separated her from the dead quivered, as though a floodgate threatened to burst. She clenched her teeth, determined not to let that force overwhelm her. If the spirit broke free entirely, it could use any or all of them as vessels. From behind, a whispered voice, "You need to stop him." She turned and saw in the gloom a hazy silhouette. Briggs. The spirit must have followed her, or perhaps the surge of energy had drawn him back. He hovered uncertainly, as though the violent energy in the air caused him pain. "I'm trying," Siobhan hissed. Her vision doubled as the artifact's power spiked. She needed to strike at the robed leader fast. Raising the iron bar like a makeshift lance, she leapt forward. The leader caught sight of her and attempted to thrust his dagger in defense. But her blow was decisive, cracking against his forearm. He yelped in pain, the dagger spinning away into the darkness. Another acolyte tried to intervene, but Siobhan landed a solid blow to his side, leaving him gasping. In the center of the slab, the idol trembled violently. A swirling haze seeped out around it, materializing into a twisting pillar of dark smoke that formed a half-visible shape, a gaunt, monstrous figure. Its eyes, inky voids, gleamed with a malevolence older than any mortal memory. Tendrils of black vapor coiled from its body like starving snakes. "Run!" Briggs's voice echoed, and for an instant Siobhan felt a numb fear grip her. But then she remembered all the other ghosts she had seen, all the times she had come close to turning her curse aside. This, above all, was a test she couldn't fail. She gripped the artifact in both hands, ignoring the draining chill that sapped her body heat. The monstrous spirit flickered, half in the idol, half out. The robed figures cowered or tried to cling to the perimeter of the chamber, their own summoning gone awry. Summoning her own will, Siobhan tried to invoke a containment ritual she had learned from an old text, a half-remembered set of words scrawled on a coffee-stained note in her desk drawer. She had never tested it before, but it was all she had. Tightening her grip on the pulsing idol, she began reciting the archaic phrase, voice trembling, no longer caring about typical stealth. Her breath fumed in the cold air. The spirit snarled, an unholy sound. Smoke whipped around her, and she felt a crushing pressure on her chest. Another wave of chanting rose from one or two cultists who hadn't retreated, perhaps trying to reclaim control over the summoning. A flash of red spattered across the ceilings. Sparks crackled from overhead pipes. She pushed her awareness beyond her senses, guiding the swirling mass toward the idol's carved cavities. The runic words tumbled from her lips faster and faster. Bit by bit, the swirling darkness retracted, swirling into the artifact as if sucked down a drain. The monstrous shape moaned, trying to break free. With one final cry, she slammed the idol onto the tabletop, pouring all her remaining energy into the binding. The chamber flickered in a storm of ephemeral light. Then, with a deafening hiss, the spirit was dragged back inside the obsidian. The idol stopped trembling, its glow subsided, returning it to a cold lump of carved stone. The sudden silence was deafening. Siobhan's knees buckled, and she fell against the slab, pressing her forehead to its cool surface. Her breath ragged, she lifted her gaze. Briggs's spectral form hovered nearby, flickering in and out, and she could see concern etched across his translucent face. "You did it," he whispered, "but you need to get that thing out of here. There's more trouble if they try again." Slowly, she pulled herself upright. The cult leader knelt on the floor, clutching his injured arm. Some of the others had fled, while 2 remained unconscious, shaking from the raw energy coursing through her veins. Siobhan nudged the dagger away from the leader's grasp. "Don't even think about it," she rasped, voice hoarse. She tucked the idol under her arm. Its weight bore down with oppressive significance. She could still feel the thrumming presence of the imprisoned spirit. With halting steps, she made her way out of the chamber. Past the fallen or cowering acolytes, none made a move to stop her, evidently too shaken by the near disaster they had unleashed. The corridor was bitterly cold, the pipes overhead dripping condensation that splashed onto the grime-streaked floor. She heard the hushed voice of Briggs fade behind her as she climbed the metal staircase, returning to the night surface. Leveling into the night, she sucked in fresh air that tasted like it had never been sweeter. The distant factory lights glowed in the fog, turning it a faint orange. She needed to contact the museum's director, let him know the relic was secured, and ensure it got locked away with the strictest possible safeguards. But above all, she wanted to leave this place behind, dust off her coat and escape the industrial district's choking gloom. Still, her job included ensuring no immediate threat lingered. She settled the idol carefully in a satchel she had brought. With her phone in hand, she tried to dial a known contact, a security expert the museum sometimes hired, but the call failed to connect. The industrial district's reception was often spotty. Stepping carefully through the rubble, she reached the edge of the fence. Through the chain links, she caught a glimpse of swirling fog. Then, in a faint shimmer, Briggs appeared again, drifting on the other side of the barrier. "How are you still here?" she asked, voice low. His spectral shoulders rose in a sad shrug. "That ritual infused the air with strong energies. It's holding me here longer than usual. Or maybe it's what happened to me in this place." He let out a bitter laugh. "What will you do now?" "I don't know," he admitted, his voice carrying the weight of despair. "I was hoping maybe you could help me move on." She paused, scanning his flickering features. He had aided her, providing information she could never have gleaned otherwise. And ghosts who lingered, caught between the world of the living and the afterlife, deserved some kind of closure. "I can't promise anything, but let me see if I can help," she said, ending the attempt to call the security contact. She slid her phone away and closed her eyes, letting her cursed vision widen. She felt out the echoes around Briggs. Sometimes a ghost only needed a final, peaceful thought, or a chance to see a loved one, or to release guilt. She had facilitated such passages in the past, albeit rarely. It wasn't an exact science. Briggs's translucent form wavered as she focused. Strands of ghostly light, invisible to most, spiraled around him in shades of grey and silver. She tentatively reached out, feeling a cold tingle on her fingertips. "Briggs, think back to something that gave you solace. Maybe a family memory?" He looked at her with haunted eyes. "My daughter," he murmured. "She was 5. I never got to take her to the park again, never said goodbye." His voice cracked. Siobhan's heart twisted as she imagined the regret that bound him to this forsaken district. She whispered words of comfort, encouraging him to let that love guide him. Bit by bit, she saw the ghostly lines unraveling. A gentle glow enveloped him. She swore she could faintly see the small figure of a child in his eyes, the memory giving him the push to separate from the mortal plane. "I see her, she's smiling," he murmured, tears glimmering in his spectral gaze. Then he took one last look at Siobhan. "Thank you." His image dissolved into streams of light, dissipating into the fog. For several seconds she stood silent, letting the hush of the city fill the void he left behind. A pang of sadness washed over her, but also a sense of solace. He had been able to depart peacefully. Now, alone in the cold night, she carried a relic that could threaten countless beings if used incorrectly. She trudged toward her parked sedan, well hidden in shadows further down the block. The lights of the city's edge glimmered distantly. As she got behind the wheel, she glanced at the artifact. Its menacing aura had receded, but she suspected its occupant was as hostile as ever, merely contained again. With a heavy sigh, she drove off into the night. She dialed the museum director once more, relieved when he answered on the second ring. He was frantic, having heard whispers from one of his informants that a group of thieves was planning more than just a black market sale. He demanded updates. Siobhan told him she had the relic in her possession and would deliver it as soon as possible. But in the back of her mind, she already knew this wouldn't be the final time she crossed paths with dark forces. As long as there were people willing to risk unleashing havoc for power or fortune, her services would remain in demand. She was cursed with sight beyond life, a lonely gift that allowed her to navigate horrors others never saw. Yet, as she placed the phone down and glimpsed the idol's faint reflection in the rearview mirror, she felt a fierce sense of purpose. Tomorrow would bring another job, another ghost or relic or secret. For now, returning the artifact to a place where it could be locked away felt like a victory, even if it was fleeting. She gripped the wheel tighter, forging ahead through the sickly glow of the industrial district. In that layered gloom, she was certain she could see silhouettes, departed souls wandering without rest, and in the swirling darkness, she could almost sense Briggs's gentle gratitude, somewhere far beyond her cursed eyes. She glanced once more at the idol, then focused on the road. One case closed, but the city's shadows remained deep and restless. And in those shadows, her curse and her determination kept her ready to chase the next stolen artifact and calm the next restless ghost before the dead and the living collided again in catastrophic ways.